So how can you go about avoiding plagiarism? What are some ways to make sure that you don't plagiarize? Well, first among this is to make a conscious decision. I am going to give credit where credit is due. Right? And so if you go into it determining that you're going to do your best to make sure that in your papers you give credit to whom credit is due, you're going to avoid plagiarism. Right? You're going to be overly concerned to make sure that you're citing information correctly. Now, you might still end up poorly citing something, but if you go in saying, if I use a source, I'm going to give credit for that source. Even if I don't know exactly how to do it, I'm going to do something to try and indicate. Right? That's going to avoid plagiarism. You're not going to make that mistake. Another thing to do to avoid plagiarism, as we've talked about already, keep careful notes. Make sure that you are, however you do it, right? Keep careful notes so that you know where you got things from, what words are yours, right? So I'm paraphrasing here, but also words that are specific to the source. The American Historical Association says to avoid plagiarism, to be generous and thorough in your citations. Right? If you're not sure if you should cite something, cite it. I mean, it's better to cite too much than not enough. But ultimately, kind of connected with this first one, if you are committed to honesty and integrity, and then you're going to do your best to make sure to avoid plagiarism. And so those are some ways to prevent yourself from plagiarizing. Because yes, plagiarism happens unintentionally, but more often than not, it is deliberate. So if you are already conscious of, I could accidentally put something in somebody else's words, you should be able to avoid some of the most common mistakes people make with plagiarism. And something else that could be on here as well is start your papers early. Right? So time management is one of those things that causes people to plagiarize. Start your papers earlier. Right? So there's not that temptation to, at the last minute, put something as your own. One of the major ways to avoid plagiarism is to make sure that you're engaging in proper citation. So we're going to turn now to talking about citation, specifically citation of in the style for biblical studies. Citation is important for a couple of reasons. It's not just an empty exercise to see if you can do it right. There are a couple of principles behind it. First of all, citation is important so that you can demonstrate what has come from other sources. So you avoid plagiarism. So I am clearly marking this information came from somebody else. I may have put it in my own words, but this information or idea came from someone else. So what information came from, but also where did that information come from? Right? And so they say, okay, all right, this information came from somebody else. Where did it come from? Right? So that's the information as well. To coordinate, or to not to coordinate, to indicate your dependence on someone else for information, as well as to indicate, I've done my work. I know what I'm talking about. I've investigated this. I've looked at these sources. And so citation demonstrates a couple of things. But when it comes to citation, there are a wide variety of style manuals out there as to how to cite. Right? There's the APA, MLA, Turabian, Chicago. There's other style manuals as well. So what does it matter? Why not just however I cite it, I cite? Well, there's a need for consistency in citation. First, consistency allows people to find other people find the information they're looking for, right? So let's say you do a paper on some topic and you're sharing it with somebody or the professor, and the professor says, "Oh, wow, that's some really interesting information. I want to look up and see more about this article." Right? So I didn't know that. Let me look this up a little bit more. Right? And so in order for that person to find that information, Consistent citation is important, so I can say, okay, this is where this source is, and here's how I can find it as well. Secondly, it's important because citation style manuals are connected with a discipline. And to engage in citation according to the manual of your discipline demonstrates you're participating in that discipline. And so if I'm engaging in MLA citation, that shows I'm engaged in the English field, for example, the English discipline. The same kind of thing with the Society of Biblical Literature citation guide. It demonstrates that I'm participating in biblical studies. As well as, once you get some of these things down and know what you're doing, know how to do it, it makes papers a lot easier to write because you already know how to cite. And so if you consistently write your papers using the same style guide, it becomes easier to write them and to cite them appropriately. In citation, there are a couple of things generally across the board that it doesn't matter whether it's MLA, APA, or SBL. There's some information that most style manuals are going to require. First, the author. Who is it that wrote the work, the source that you're drawing from? So you're going to be expected to say something about the author. So if you're writing your notes, make sure to put the author down who wrote it. Additionally, you're also going to need the name of the source. All right, what the book, the journal, article, whatever it is, you're going to need that as well. Publication details. Who published it? Where was it published? Additionally, usually the date is also a requirement of that citation information. When was it published? If it's a book, you usually just need a year. If it's a journal article, you probably need a month and a year. If it were a newspaper, you might need a month, a day, and a year. But there's going to be a requirement there of the date. You have to have the date of when the source was released or published. And then finally, page numbers or some sort of similar reference. Now, obviously, if you were doing an electronics resource like a website, there might not be a similar type of, it's not going to have a page number. Also problematic is when you use e-books on certain e-readers. You might not have a page number. Right? You might have like a location number. Like if you get a Kindle book. If it's an e-book, like if you get it through the library, right? I've borrowed it through the library. Those sources are going to be exact page numbers. Where if you had a physical copy of the book and the e-book, the page numbers are going to be the same. However, if you get a Kindle edition, for example, a lot of that's going to be shaped by what kind of information is able to be displayed on screen at one time, which might be different than what would be on a physical book. And so the page numbers are not going to be the same. But usually there's some sort of reference to say, not just who wrote it, where they wrote it, when it was written, but also how can I find that information? Right? If I was looking for that resource, how can I find that information? A couple of things as well in thinking about preparation for citation. A couple of definitions to keep in mind. Things probably you already know, but just want to refresh your memory about. A footnote consists of a citation that occurs at the end of the page on which the material is cited. All right, and so you're on page, you're working through your paper, and you come to a place where you need to make a citation. A footnote would then be located at the end of that page, the bottom of that page, giving your citation information. An endnote is a citation at the end of the paper where you list all of your citations in numerical order. And so if I'm reading through your paper and you've done endnotes, I will be on like page 2 and you'll have endnote 1. I flip to the back of the page, look at endnote 1, and that tells me what information is cited. Right? So footnote, bottom of the page, endnote, end of the paper. A parenthetical citation refers to a citation in text. And so as you're going through the paragraph, a parenthetical citation is at the end of the sentence that is related to your citation. A bibliographic citation refers to information at the end of your paper, particularly, giving a list of all the sources that you used in that paper, alphabetically ordered by the last name of the author. And so it's not easy, like if you have a footnote, an endnote, or a parenthetical citation, you can immediately see, all right, this is what this source is connected to. A bibliographic citation might include all your sources you used, but it's not in the order that you used them in your paper. It's in the order of what they were alphabetically. The citation manual for biblical studies is the SBL Handbook of Style. The SBL refers to the Society of Biblical Literature, a common or rather popular biblical studies academic organization. It has academics in biblical studies from a wide variety of fields. Its manual is predominantly for things related to the ancient Near East, early Christian sources, and biblical studies. And so those are the fields that would fall under the SBL Handbook of Style. It is based on, you may have heard of the Chicago Manual of Style. I don't know why this happens. You may have heard the Chicago Manual of Style, another popular manual of style, very similar to the SBL Handbook, and if there is some sort of information that isn't addressed in SBL, they will often say, refer to the Chicago Manual of Style for information. The SBL Handbook is now in its second edition, and it's actually available as an e-book, right? And so we'll go through some information on how to cite SBL style, but it's also available through our library as an e-book so that if you have to refer to it, you don't actually have to go out and buy a copy of it. You can just access it through the library. It is a reference work on citation. And it gives you other information about abbreviations and where to put your commas and those kind of things, but essentially the focus of it is, help you decide how to source something. And covers a wide variety of publications. It covers books, it covers journal articles, it covers websites, it covers CD-ROMs, original manuscripts, variety of commentaries, all sorts of things. And so in general, you're probably going to be able to find in the SBL manual how to do a citation for whatever you are doing. And the purpose of the book, of course, is to standardize citation in biblical studies so that people writing in the New Testament, people writing in the Old Testament, people writing in ancient Near East are all citing in the same way so that other people reading their work know, oh, okay, I can find where this is located. So how do I go about using the SBL handbook? What do I need to pay attention to? Well, the first thing is to recognize what kind of publication am I trying to cite? Is it a book? Is it a journal article? Is it a website? Is it an e-book? All right. That is going to determine what you're looking for. All right. So I have a book or I have a commentary I'm trying to cite. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look then at the table of contents and look down through, oh, here's commentaries. All right. Flip to that page or go to that page. When I go to that page, the SBL handbook provides me a sample of what information is needed, right? Telling me how to put the name of the author, the name of the source, the whatever book it comes from. And all that information, I see a sample of what it should look like, and then I copy that based on what source I'm looking for, right? So the author goes here, the title goes here, the date of publication goes here, And so that's how to follow it. Questions or comments? So let's look into a couple of different types of things you will be citing. One of the things that will be a major source of citation, of course, will be biblical passages. So, how do you cite biblical passages? Well, it depends on what you're wanting to do. But biblical citations are in-text citations. You do not use a footnote or an endnote for a biblical passage, nor do you need to include the Bible as a source in your bibliography. All right? So the Bible is one of the few types of sources that you use that is parenthetically referred to in the text. Now, some cases you don't necessarily need citation. The woman taken in adultery is the famous text in the Gospel of John. That's basically one of those well-known, accepted facts. And so that's common knowledge. You don't need a book to tell you that in biblical studies. Right? If you were talking to an atheist or an agnostic, it might not be common knowledge to them, but in general, most Christians have heard of the woman taken in adultery. And so if you're just, talking about that, you don't need a parenthetical citation. You've already kind of cited it a little bit, saying it's in the Gospel of John. Now, there might be some reason why you want to include the biblical text, the passages, the specific passage. To do so, you parenthetically cite it at the end of the sentence you're talking about, giving your verse information, and the period goes after the parentheses. All right? So it's not period parenthetical, it's parenthetical citation, period. But what if you're wanting to do a specific verse, like this one, which is verse 7. Jesus said, "Let anyone among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at him." It's not technically plagiarism, in the sense that it's obvious here that you're quoting. You said that Jesus said it. But it would be a good idea to include the specific verse, so you would include the specific verse parenthetically, being with the period after the parentheses, the end of the quotation, however, before the parentheses. Now, if you just wrote it this way, it would be period and quotation marks. But if you cite it with the verse, note the punctuation. Now, in most cases, unless you are specifically emphasizing what translation you are using, you don't need to include the translation. So if you're just, the importance is the words of the quote, not the specific version it came from. If, however, it's important that the version be cited, I had that in my notes, but I guess I deleted that slide by accident. Then you should put John 8:7 and then abbreviation for the, so NRSV for New Revised Standard, ESV for English Standard Version, KJV for King James Version, right? And so in most cases you don't need to include the translation it came from, but if it's important, then you would include the abbreviation after the verse. We'll go ahead and stop there because I now want to get into how you say books, journal articles, those kind of things, and we only have a few minutes left. And so instead of overwhelming you with that, we'll pick that up on Wednesday.